Okay, something I've been doing this morning is creating this texture brush, which I use in all sorts of ways. I'll share in other tutorials now going forward, but it's amazing for creating your own textures. Why buy anything when you can create it yourself? So with my opacity and flow at 100%, that's what it's looking like. Let's zoom in, you can see just how much texture there is on there. And how did I create this? I created it from nature. So it's from this photograph. And the reason that I picked this and photographed it is just look at the texture on it. So if we zoom in, it's an ICM, a very subtle one. And the reason I put camera movement on is because if you look at these gold edges, this is because the edges of the leaves had a different colour and looked almost serrated. So I knew that if I moved the camera a teeny tiny bit, we'd get this effect going on. So if you like this brush, I am going to put it on my website. But if you want to know how to make your own brushes, let me just show you how I did it. So the first thing I do is I always duplicate my layer. So you can see at the bottom here, layer 0 was the original, and I said Command or Control J to duplicate the layer, which is this one. So I then come into Camera Raw with these images. Let's just show you what I did in Camera Raw. And I wanted it to be even more contrasty. So in light, in our light options, you can see I've pulled my highlights and shadows. It's not prescriptive, so you might need to do something entirely different in here. So I've picked out this area here as my brush, and I've done that because I've got enough black around the edge that I can isolate this section, and I kind of like the effect that's going to give me for the brush. If you picked this here, it's just going to be too clunky. It's going to be like a big blob. We want something with an awful lot of contrast because that is where you're going to get your texture. So in my effects box, I've also just moved my clarity and texture sliders slightly as well. So let's come back out of there. My next step was then to cut out my area that I wanted to be my brush. So let me just show you on the mask. So there you can see, oh, I've still got my brush selected. Hopefully that won't distract you. So you can see all I've done is gone in, I've selected my lasso tool and drawn a circle around that. Let's just show you, grab the lasso tool. So I've gone round there like that, clicked my mask, which has given me, as you can see it there on my layer mask, black hides, white reveals. So the only thing now showing is the section I've cut out. Now, something that's really important to point out now is with brushes, it's kind of in reverse to the rest of Photoshop. So black hides and white reveals on a layer mask, but when you're making a brush, what is going to be shown is going to be black and white is your background. So it's kind of round the other way. So the next thing I did was invert this layer for that very reason. So there is my inversion. So it looks blue because the inversion to yellow is blue. So to invert your layer, you sit on your layer and you hit Control or Command I to invert. So if I just turn this back the other way, Command I on that layer, as you can see, it's then put it back to yellow and black, invert again, and we're back to blue and white. So we've now got all these inversions where I've turned it back the other way. So let's just get rid of these to get rid of the pressure that it puts on my processor on my poor computer. So let's just get rid of these. So if you end up with lots and lots of smart filters you don't want, if you just use this little icon button at the side, right click, and then you can just delete them. So there you go, there's my single inversion back. So something else I always do is then I make the brush black and white because we need to work with black and white. Only when I do that, obviously you can't see my brush because this was actually on transparency. So this checkerboard you can see in the background is transparency. So in order to see what I was doing, I put a white layer underneath. As you can see here, layer 1 is the white layer that went underneath. So if you don't know how to do that and you want to create a blank layer, I would have been sitting up here on this texture layer. So I would have said, let's create a blank layer using create new layer. Now we'll always put it above the layer that you're sitting on. So there you go, layer 6 is now a blank layer. And the shortcut to create fill, because we want that to be filled with white. So let's turn off the one I've done. So we want to fill this with white. So my shortcut for that is Shift and Delete. And that gives you the dialog box to say, what would you like to fill this with? Well, I'd like to fill it with white. So I'd say, okay. You can't now see because this is over the top. So I'm going to drag that down underneath. And let's just get rid of layer 1 because that was the original. So now you can see where there was transparency, we've now got our white layer underneath. Okay, so I made this black and white, and I do that by adding a black and white adjustment layer rather than doing it in Camera Raw. And the reason I do that is because we can now see the black and white adjustment layer because I've selected it. You've got your options, and by using these sliders, you can affect the depth of your textured brush. So it's always worth just playing around with these sliders and seeing if you can make much difference. We're not going to make much difference to mine now because I've already created the brush. But that's the reason I do that. You could just make it mono when you're in Camera Raw. That's your other way of doing it. And then I would have looked at this and thought, well, you know, this isn't actually strong enough. I want this a bit stronger. I want there to be more depth and contrast. So I've added a levels adjustment. So if you're not sure, and you're new to Photoshop and you're getting lost, to create your levels adjustment, here is your little icon at the bottom here with all your adjustment layers. So I'd have just clicked levels and that would have popped in this levels adjustment, and you can move them around just like any other layer. So here's my properties box. I like to keep it small up here. So let's just drag it out so you can see. So as you can see, I've basically moved my black slider, that's what the brush did look like, and I've just pulled it all the way down to the right, and if I kept going it would get even deeper, but I just don't want that to be too clunky and dark in the middle there. It won't work for me. So let's just pop that back to roughly where it was. So that is how I've then created what looks like the brush. So your final stage, let's put my properties box where it belongs. Your final stage is to now cut this brush out. And to do that, I just use the marquee tool. So here's my marquee tool and I just draw around it as a selection. You don't need to cut it out again. Photoshop will just see the selection. So I leave my selection active. Make sure I've got the layer selected. As you can see, I've got the black and white adjustment layer selected at the moment. So there's not actually anything to cut out. So I come back down to the layer where our content is that we want to say this is the brush. Make sure that's selected, and then we're going to go edit, and we're going to come down to define brush preset, and we're going to call this practice brush so I know where to delete it. Hit OK, and we should now have a brush. So let's just see, shall we? Let's come up to our top layer here, create another new blank layer, Shift Delete, fill it with white, and I'm going to make sure I turn off my selection because you'll see there's still a selection. Selections are active on every layer until you turn that off. So to turn off a selection, we go Command or Control D. I've got my brush selected, and unfortunately, because I had the selection active, it's filled only the selection with white. You'll see the rest is not white. So let's just delete that and do it again. New blank layer, Shift Delete. Okay, let's fill it with white. B for the brush tool if you haven't got the brush selected, and because this was the brush we've just created, there is our brush, and it's purple because I have got purple selected. We can select any colour. Oops. And don't forget, if you want to make some adjustments to your brush and how it behaves, and I will do this in a different tutorial, if you hit this button here, once you've got your brush selected, you then can change how the brush moves. I'm going to do that in separate tutorial and put some instructions on the website for you as well. Okay, so there is the brush. Let's zoom in and you can see. And don't forget, you can change your opacity and you can also change the mode. So for example, that's dissolve. You can see the difference. But there's your basic brush. Really handy, nice little bit of texture on it. That's simple, and you took it from nature, from one of your own photographs, or in this case mine. I will put it on the website for you if you just want to download the brush, or that is how you very easily create a brush with texture. Loads of fun, have fun with that. If you like these videos, I'd be really grateful if you would hit subscribe and like. That would really help me out. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.